was a father of 7, and my youngest was just 6 months old. Tuesday night was the night for me to be on that train.
So Mi-kyung was at her job as a librarian at the math library at Columbia University, very punctual. She usually caught the 5:33.
Always take the 5:33.
Just made the 5:33, literally, by seconds. As a typical New Yorker, you read the newspaper in the morning and a novel at night. And so I was reading.
As I think anybody who has lived in Long Island knows, the traffic can be pretty rough, especially during rush hour, so much easier to take mass transportation.
Full Park, New Park, Maryland Avenue.
I was 7.5 months pregnant with my daughter. I was coming home that night to go pick out the layette and meet my mother. This was my first child, so life was good.
This was in between New Park and Maryland Avenue. That's when the shooting started.
I saw someone get up and take the gun and start shooting everyone from right to left, and it was chaos. I'm sorry.
It was an automatic weapon, so I got shot 5 times. I laid on the floor and played dead. I could remember the smell of the gun going off. I could also remember the shells were bouncing. He came back, stepped over me, reloaded the gun, stepped over me again, and continued to shooting.
I decided to get in a crouched position. I kept thinking, all I really want to be is a mother, and I don't think I will be. And I think what any mother would do. You're protecting that unborn baby the best you can. And that was my goal. My goal was to protect her.
And I headed east up the center aisle to get away from where the shooting was taking place. And shooting started again, turned around and saw the shooter coming up at me. Nobody was between me and him.
He just started shooting everyone from right to left. There was nowhere to go. We couldn't crawl underneath the seat, and then he was only sitting a couple of seats in front of me, and so I got shot on my back.
I just went down on the floor and covered my head as best I could, thinking, you just don't want to get hit in the head. And when it was clear I had nowhere to go, that people were getting killed, I was like, man, this is not what I thought would happen. Father of 7 kids, this is really, it was like almost like a prayer, like, really, this is it?
And so I'm crawling on my elbows to get under the empty seat, and I could feel the penetration between my shoulder blades, as if somebody stabbed me and lit a match. And then he must have lowered the gun, and then he shot me in the hip. I knew I was going to die, no question. And I kept looking at my 10-year anniversary ring and looking at the dirty train floor, and I'm saying, I can't believe I'm going to die alone on the floor, on the dirty train floor.
I could see them get shot, and I could see the flashes from the muzzle of the gun. You're looking at a river of blood in the train, because people were shot in the head, one through the neck, and just a river of blood.
Well, I was on the 533 from Penn Station, and the train stopped at the Maryland Avenue stop, and apparently the people were scurrying from the front car, and there was a rumor there was a shooting.
Guy just went berserk, bodies all over, guys were shot in the head. The shots just kept going off. He wouldn't stop shooting. He just wouldn't stop shooting.
Gunmen started coming down the car, shooting at people, and I just crouched down under the seat and just prayed.
Most of the people that get on the train at that hour are sleeping. I mean, the conductors, basically, people put the tickets around their neck or they put it in their pocket. Nobody's thinking about something like this. It's devastating.
Now everybody is going to start to have, fear.
Came over to police radio. Shots fired in a train pulling into the Maryland train station. Subject is still inside the train. And I looked at my partner, I go, could that be real? We were one of the first cars on the scene.
It is complete chaos. We don't know how many people are shot. We're getting all different reports. There are multiple 911 calls.
Police emergency 239.
Yeah, this is 7-Eleven in Garden City Park. There's an eastbound train on the Maryland Avenue train station right here. There's a guy with a gun. He just shot some people. People coming in with blood on them.
He emptied his gun out, just randomly shooting people in the head and neck. He then reloaded and then continued shooting through the car. Then my neighbor and a couple other people grabbed him.
Pandemonium, and it was horrible. It was a massacre. It's the first time in my career that I actually smelled blood. That's how much blood there was. It was running down the middle of the car.
You wonder how someone could do something like that. I mean, we saw children there, up there with their mothers crying. It was really emotional,
And when the train conductor opened up the door, it was like Die Hard. Helicopters, ambulance, chaos.
This was absolute carnage. I have never seen anything even close to this.
The worst shot came through my hand and destroyed my left thumb, and then wound up in my neck and in my mouth. Actually, I had to remove it from my tongue.
I felt the warmness of the blood coming from where I was shot. I rubbed my stomach and I said, kick for me. And she did. I knew from that point that we were both going to be okay.
People didn't hear of mass shootings. I never heard of a mass shooting, or it never registered.
I made the announcement that 6 people had been shot, they believed to be dead, and 19 others were shot as well.
I opened the door and I said, was my husband killed? They said yes, and I dropped to the floor. Very hard for a 10-year-old to find out her father just died.
I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe my father was not going to come home from work that day.
Mi-kyung was a really sparkling and intelligent and artistic and creative person who was just beginning to figure out what she wanted to do in life. We were like twins. We could read each other's minds and finish each other's sentences. It was just so unfathomable when they disconnected her life support system and my mom saw my sister's, I guess it might have been an EKG monitor, just flatline after that because she had been shot in the head with a black Talon bullet. You can't survive that. And so it was a huge shock. Of course, today, because there are just so many mass shootings, it's become normalized. But back then, yeah, it was as if an atomic bomb had detonated in our living room. That's really what it felt like. And for years afterward, we just spent our lives just wandering around in this nuclear winter. That's what it felt like.
A couple would be on help, and I couldn't do anything for them. I also saw, I guess, Kevin McCarthy shot in the head, point blank range. And Dennis McCarthy, I could watch his color go from normal living color to gray.
They worked in Wall Street and Kevin had just started a new job. He and his father grew so close because they sat next to each other. I got home. I pulled into the driveway. My brother came out and just started, Carolyn, there's been an accident. Dennis, he said, has died. But Kevin is still alive and they're operating on him, but he was shot in the head. I was screaming. The doctor came and said, Mrs. McCarthy, we don't think your son's gonna make it. He came up off the cloud of being in a coma, still couldn't speak. When Kevin did open up his eyes, he just looked at me and he's like, where's Dad? And I just said, your dad's not here right now. And he said, Dad, Then he said shoulder. I didn't know at that time that his father died on his shoulder. And I'm saying, oh my God, he knows his father died. I said, yes, Kevin, your father is gone. But you're going to be okay. Now you got to fight. And I'm going to be here with you. And I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to like. I am not going to be your mother. I'm going to be your nurse. People are going to tell you you're not going to walk. People are going to tell you you're not going to speak. And I'm going to tell you when I'm done with you, you might have some weaknesses, but I'm telling you, you're going to be there. And you're going to go forward. Because you ain't going to die on me.
The person who committed this crime is an animal who turned that Long Island Railroad car into a death chamber.
He is a fellow by the name of Colin Ferguson. He's a 35-year-old single individual, unemployed, former student at Adelphi University in somewhere around 1990, born in Kingston, Jamaica.
I took everything out of his pockets. And at that point, I found he had notes in his pockets. And I took a quick look at the note. It said the reason for this: Adelphi University racism. And he was very close to Adelphi at Maryland. The EEOC's racism, workers' compensation racism, New York Transit Police, New York City Police, the racism of Governor Cuomo's staff and exec chamber, the racism of the Lieutenant Governor's staff and exec chamber. It seemed like you read it that he just hated everybody. It's hard to describe, but it was like looking at a demon. You know, he just had that look in his eyes that wasn't making any sense. You know, it was horrible.
His paperwork, it indicates that he particularly chose Nassau County over New York City because he has some particular feelings about Mayor Dinkins and chose not to commit this act in New York City. He did it out here. Paperwork reveals strong hostility being harbored by him in terms of racism. He mentions particularly a variety of people and institutions that he felt were racist. It seems he had hostilities regarding a major portion of the population.
He kept extensive notes on everyone he hated. And he hated blacks, he hated whites, he hated Asians, he hated his neighbors. He also hated anonymous institutions.
Did he seem to choose his victims, or was it completely random?
It appeared to be at random as he moved forward in the car.
Active shooter cases were being manifested at that time. Situations where we had an individual or multiple individuals attacking and killing somebody else, they started calling those things active shooter cases because more than one person got shot.
Personally, I'd never even heard the term active shooter at that time. It was certainly rare.
You thought of a gunfight, you know, two people shooting at each other, just somebody walking around executing people? No, never expected it.
The unemployed Jamaican immigrant had decided to vent his rage outside New York City because of his respect for Mayor Dinkins.
It now appears that rage was spawned by an incident on the Manhattan subway and, quote, by the filthy Caucasian racist female on the #1 line.
As a student at Nassau Community College, Ferguson made Dean's List as an accounting and business administration major, but he reportedly had problems with his temper.
Police say the oral statements are not so much a confession, but rather conversations he had with police that lead them to believe he knew exactly what he was doing.
Poor me, poor me. These people had it against me. I had a problem here because of them. Nothing at all was ever his fault. We found not only in the box for the gun that he had, we found the pad that he used to write these notes. We also got numerous writing samples from his home. so we could compare them to the notes. He made a big, big deal about the current problem he was having with workmen's compensation. This might be what put him over the edge. He had taken a settlement. He fell out of a chair at work, claimed workman's comp, and then decided that it wasn't enough, so he was going to appeal it. That day, he got the final decision that the case was over.
In speaking with Colin, his father had owned some type of manufacturing company in Jamaica, that he was the oldest son, and that a problem developed when I believe his father was leaving the business to his younger brother. Obviously, I'm the oldest, why aren't I getting the business and so forth? So I think some of the anger, that he later exhibited was from that.
We have 3 deceased, all shot from the rear. Ferguson got on the train in Jamaica. This is the 533 at a Penn Station. As soon as the train left the New Hyde Park station, Ferguson started his shooting. In the 3+ minutes that it took to get Maryland Station, he fired 30 rounds, 15 hollow point bullets and 15 black talons, resulting in 6 deaths and 19 wounded. There were actually a total of 44 gun wounds from the 30 bullets that he fired.
The weapon involved is a 9mm Ruger semi-automatic. It holds 15 rounds in a magazine and 1 in a chamber. He also had a small canvas bag with in excess of 100 additional rounds of ammunition.
In the rear of the car, directly in front of him across the aisle, was Dennis McCarthy. He's a 52-year-old married father. He was heading home, and he was shot from the rear. Directly next to him was his son, Kevin, who was 26 years old. Kevin was very unsure as to whether he was going to survive or not. In front of them was James Garicki. He's 51-year-old, married, father of 1. Directly in front of him was a 24-year-old young man, Richard Nettleton. In the aisle, just a seat or so forward, was Amy Federici. Amy was 27 years old. She was just getting over the loss of her husband. Right next to Amy on the floor was another 27-year-old female, Mi Kwan Kim. Further up in the car, in the eastern vestibule, was a 30-year-old Filipino woman, Marita Magtoto. She was married, and she was heading home at the time. Marita was shot from the front. This would be the epitome of your true innocent victim. These are people who were sitting on the train up, do it 5 days a week, probably 300 days a year, and the true innocent victim with no involvement whatsoever, no connection whatsoever to Ferguson. 3 other severely wounded, including John Forney, who was seated right in front of him.
The goal was to get my hand up before he got his hand down, and then I would have had the gun. But unfortunately, he beat me, blew the knuckle out there. He shot me over here, so you can see the skin grafts. And the 2 that did the most damage got me here and here.
By now, everybody realized what was happening. There's nowhere to go. There's no way to go on the train. People were diving between the seats, people laying on top of each other. He got this far when he ran out of his second magazine. When he started to go back, he was tackled right here by this seat.
3 commuters took advantage of a moment in time where he was probably reloading and overpowered him. That's my
and wrestled him to the floor.
That was bravery. It really was. Going after somebody with a gun.
It was ascertained that this gun was purchased legally in California. He can't transport it back to New York. He doesn't have a New York license for the weapon. But his purchase was legal in California. When that bullet strikes you, it creates a talon on the end of each portion of the mushroom. That type of round just causes immense damage as it going through a person and then to the second person.
So these are articles I kept over the years.
I was sitting in the aisle seat. Colin Ferguson was sitting right here, which is about 4 seats in front of me. I got into the fetal position, played dead. It went in my right side, and it came out my left. And then someone came to ask me if I was okay, and all I just remembered was my mom. I needed to call my mom.
He had no trouble talking to her. He wasn't going to admit to anything. But he was chatting away about everything like nothing happened. The only thing he did ask us at one point was how many people were dead. He wouldn't say he did it, and basically what he wanted to talk about was that life is not fair. And for him, it's not fair because he's black.
Commissioner, does Ferguson have a history of mental illness or drug use?
Not that I'm aware of. And we have no indication of any previous on him in terms of arrest.
I never expected anything like this to ever happen in Garden City.
And if it can happen here, it can happen any place.
It makes you wonder if you're safe anywhere.
There were all of these warnings, red flags, yellow flags, screaming stop signals. He was ticking for a long time. A lot of people heard the ticking, and a lot of people did nothing. And look, I'm not suggesting that people had some sort of a duty to do something. I'm not suggesting there was really anything much that could be done. As we know, 30 years later, having seen a great deal more of folks like this, it is very, very hard to do something about it before it happens. But it was notable for me at the time just how much warning he gave that something horrifically awful was going to happen. Colin Ferguson reached out to my then partner, the late William Kunstler, who was one of the best known civil rights and criminal defense lawyer in the last half of the 20th century.
I'm asking that the court...
We said, well, okay, we'll come out and talk with you. We explained the contours of a possible defense, an insanity defense, based on his corrosive exposure to racism, which we eventually got dubbed the Black Rage defense, but it was always an insanity defense.
He fought with Kunstler and Kuby, the attorneys that came in on this Black Rage / insanity defense. For that to gain some momentum, he'd have to acknowledge that he killed these people. His reaction was very clear. He was not involved in shooting and killing these people.
The defendant is not an incapacitated person, and that he does not, as a result of mental disease or defect, lack capacity to understand the proceedings against him and to assist in his own defense.
Ferguson seemed to take it all in stride. He calmly fired his lawyers, told the judge there would be no insanity defense, and then told attorneys Kuby and Kunstler he'd like them only to assist him in the trial if and when necessary.
I believe that I can prove my innocence. I believe that I can be acquitted, and I believe that I can do a better job than just about anyone else.
The idea of it is so horrible to contemplate that it staggers the imagination, because Colin Ferguson genuinely believes he didn't commit the crime, he didn't do the shooting, and everybody knows that he did.
He's basically incapable of making rational choices about his defense. We sought an order having him declared incompetent, so he would be packed away to a mental institution, secure mental institution.
Psychiatrists proved in court Ferguson understands right from wrong and therefore must face our criminal justice system.
The bar is very, very low in this country and in the state of New York for what we consider to be competent to stand trial. Competence is defined as to whether or not the defendant first understands the nature of the proceedings against him.
And then he decided he was going to defend himself. We know from law enforcement side, when an individual defends himself, it's harder on the victims.
Now, I have to tell them that they're going to have to face him. He's going to ask them questions.
How did they take it?
Not well. They weren't happy about it. Some of them didn't know if they could do it.
I was an
MTA driver, city bus driver. And this got called for jury duty, and I was like, okay, wow. Walked into the courtroom, and Colin Ferguson was sitting right there with his attorneys on both sides, and I was like, really? This case? I didn't want to be there. And then when I got selected for the jury foreman, I was like, are you kidding me? Me? Didn't have a clue what was waiting for me.
There were 93 counts to that indictment. 93 counts, only because it matches the year 1993. Had it been 1925, it would have been 25 counts. This is a case of stereotype victimization of a black man and subsequent conspiracy to destroy him. Colin Ferguson was in fact a well-meaning passenger on the train. Like any other passenger, he dozed off. Having the weapon in a bag, at that point, someone opened the bag, took the weapon out of the bag, and proceeded to shoot.
It would look like a trial in the same sense that if inmates in a mental institution decided to put on a play, and the theme of the play was a trial, that would look like a trial too. But it wouldn't erase the fact that this was poisonous insanity.
What made it very bizarre was he was sitting there cross-examining individuals that he tried to kill.
So you have no idea who shot you?
I only saw you with the gun.
You were holding it in both hands, like this.
This beautiful girl with an angelic face came on the train, and 2 minutes later, she was dead at my feet. Her blood was on my pants, blood all over. He looked me in the eyes, square in the face. I'm looking at you right now. And he pointed his gun at me.
He looked me dead in the eye and pointed the gun, and with the most serious look I have ever seen on anyone's face, he shot me in the chest.
When she said that, the trial was over for me. Because I was like, I don't need to hear. There was a whole lot of witnesses. What? You shot her, that's enough for me.
He's right there sitting in the middle. Colin Ferguson.
And I just thought it was crazy. I know you shot me. You shot everyone on that train.
The defendant got up from his seat, bit his lip, and started shooting everyone on that train. And no one is going to tell me different.
Is it your testimony under Mr. Peck's questioning that you saw no one shot?
I saw you shooting everyone on the train, okay?
Did there come a time when you heard a pop?
Here, when you got up out of your
Judge,
seat.
Could you admonish the witness to answer the question?
Yes.
If you would just try to find.
I'm sorry. I got a little out of control. Oh, it was wonderful. I got him nervous this time, and he was the one who was nervous. And I'm so happy.
After my testimony, I got in the car and I went to the airport and I left and didn't come back.
Where'd you go?
I went to California. I started a new life there, and no trains. I love New York, I love Long Island, but I just couldn't do the train anymore. I just needed to forget and move on, and then I'm ready to remember again.
It was cruel and hurtful for the witnesses to look you dead in the face at the person that shot you. So that was really torment. He actually hurt them more. He shot them, he killed them. Now he's hurting them mentally.
He was moving methodically, left and right shooting. And he was approaching a little bit further, and I can hear him say, "You're gonna get it, you're gonna get it." I heard someone say, "Get him." And so I proceeded to go forward. It slipped on some blood. And then myself, Kevin Blum, and Mark McEntee, then we pushed him into one of the aisle seats.
Initially, I was
completely scared out of my wits. The only thoughts that were going through my mind at the time were that I was going to be shot, that this wasn't fair to my wife and to my children.
I saw the gun in the seat here. I picked it up, stuck it in my raincoat. We held him there. He yelled, "Don't hurt me."
I don't believe that there is any kind of evidence brought out in any testimony, whether it be through direct examination or cross-examination, that would indicate that these charges could stand up in this court.
He was not going to have anyone acknowledge the fact that he killed these people in cold blood. To this day, 30 years later, absolutely not. No.
No remorse.
No remorse. He expressed sorrow that these individuals had lost their lives, but it wasn't him that caused them to lose their lives.
Should somebody like Colin Ferguson have stood trial? Isn't he insane?
I don't think that there was any evidence or anything there to indicate that Colin Ferguson, other than the acts that he was convicted of, is a horrific, mean-spirited, evil crime. So either somebody's insane in that they don't understand the consequences of their conduct or what's right from wrong. He did.
You're going, we're straight. Watch the pillars.
Dude, watch behind you guys. You're going to hit the pole.
Where we went, left, right, or over?
One of the most dramatic moments of the trial was underway, and Kevin walked in to face for the first time the man accused of shooting him point blank in the head and killing his father seated next to him.
I remember leaving Penn Station and then hearing an undistinguished sound. No, I did not realize I was shot.
When is your next memory?
Just awaking in the hospital. I lost an estimated 10% of my brain.
Members of the jury, good morning. As you can see, I'm a little bit disorganized here, only because it was just about impossible to get everything done as far as formulating my summation. How many other people were like Kevin McCarthy who did not see the shooter? Where was the lineup? Where were the photographs? Not guilty. That will be the most joyful day, I believe.
The man hates the world. And he asks you to give him sympathy? God, the suffering he caused.
The jury took about 10 hours, and everybody's like, you got to be kidding me. This is such a, should have been an easy case. The evidence is overwhelming. What was taking them so long?
You know, we weren't looking at the clock. Basically, a man's life was in our hands making the decision whether he should get life or he should be free. And we wanted to make sure that all the victims got their justice from what Colin Ferguson did. So we wanted to make sure that he got the right charge, which was the harshest charge, where he got basically life in prison.
Will the defendant rise and face the jury? Rise and face the jury. Mr. Foreman, has the jury agreed upon a verdict?
Yes.
As to count 1 of the indictment, murder in the second degree, what is your verdict?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the second degree, count 8.
He was guilty all the way, but I was glad I was there, just to make sure he got a fair shot. I remember saying, I don't think it's a racist charge because he shot multiple people, multiple races, ethnicities. He didn't really target one particular race. We came up with a not guilty verdict on that part. I knew the pressure on me being a young black man convicting a black killer. The pressure was on me. I knew it from the start. Once the verdict was over, we was in the judge's chambers, and I just started bawling. We did our job. Oof.
We shared a bond that would grow stronger and stronger over time. But all of these hopes evaporated with one snap of your trigger finger.
You remember these eyes. You're nothing but a piece of garbage. You're a goddamn animal. 5 minutes, that's all I need. 5 minutes.
I will never understand for the rest of my life why you, Colin Ferguson, murdered my husband as well as the other 5 victims.
Here I'm talking about my husband. He killed him. He couldn't care less. So that's why when I turned to the judge and I said,
Dear Honor, may you put him away forever in prison, no parole, ever.
She was at the prime of her youth, a brilliant career as a lawyer ahead of her. She is newly married with a vision to build a family surrounded by healthy and cheerful children. She dreamt of becoming a useful member of society and a credit both to the Filipino and American communities.
I will have to endure painful, timely, and constant rehabilitation to this madman's actions for the rest of my life.
Everything that I had wanted to say about my husband, I don't want you to hear it. You don't deserve to hear what a good man he was. You don't deserve to hear the laughter that he gave us. You don't deserve to hear the strength he gave us. You took away my husband. You took away my best friend.
You smiled, Dennis.
You killed him. He was a good man, a good father. And look what you've done to my son. How can I ever forgive you?
I think it's appropriate to begin by saying that this day is significant in a number of ways.
That was a message that had to get through to him. You couldn't help but hear it as he tried to talk. The rumble of people making a mass exodus from the courtroom, and it was definitely rewarding.
And I do remember saying at the victim's impact statement, "May God have mercy on him. Let this court have none."
When they all got up and walked out, that was like stamp, and it's like it's done. You had enough of your say. You're done. It's over. No more lights, no more cameras, no more speaking. You got plenty of time to speak to yourself in the jail cell.
Let's not put the lives of people based on dollars and cents. Let's get some sanity to our gun control.
The manufacturers, the gun owners, the people, they look for the almighty dollar. Enough is enough.
And no matter how delusional or paranoid or schizophrenic Colin Ferguson appeared during the 6 weeks of this trial, that up until 10 minutes ago, he would have still been eligible to buy the same type of gun with that same large capacity clip to kill the 6 wonderful human beings and wound the 19 of us.
Justice has been done, but I don't think you can ever say it's a happy occasion when we have to sentence people for the mass murders that are going around in this country.
I am announcing today that I am running for Congress.
My granddaughter put these all up, and they had these all blown up. I probably for the first time in a long time, I broke down crying. That's when I first won, my first election. Kevin has Dennis's smile.
Winning this election, believe me, I hope sends a shockwave across the country. All we wanted to do was make something good come out of a horrible situation.
Anything I could do to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else, I will give my life to do that. I'm talking about guns, and that's all I'm talking about. And you can say anything you want, but until someone shuts me up, that's all I'll talk about. And that's all I did talk about.
I still take the train.
I consider myself extremely lucky for having survived along with my unborn child. I remember hearing you, Colin Ferguson, shooting your way up the aisle. I thought that my life was over and that I would never have the child I wanted so much.
And I wanted to be strong. And I didn't want to do what I'm doing now. I wanted to face him and tell him what he had done, to speak for the people who didn't make it, to speak for myself, and really just, you know, understand like what he had done to so many families. I finally got a little closure this year. They changed the times of some of the trains, so now the 5:33 is no more.
Just wake up, it's another shooting, and people move on. And that it's just a part of our daily life now, and it's just unfair. I think our country needs to look at other countries for a playbook to see what do they do, other countries that don't have such mass shootings.
I was not going to be silent.
I plead with the senators, and they all know me from Long Island. You have to pass this bill. It's very important.
Evil people, very confused people buy these guns, and then we get the massacres. And now it's even worse with the AR-15s. I do not understand, I will never understand why we sell AR-15s to anybody that wants to buy them. And my daughter, Karen, has to suffer that they lost their father. I mean, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
I consider her like a single mother who had to step up and make sure that other people don't go through this too. And unfortunately, we are going through it again and again and again and again. But she's trying to prevent that.
One of the deadliest gunmen goes on a shooting spree last night.
Every night I look at the news. Oh yeah, the latest shooting massacre. Shake my head. I said, why? Why? It shouldn't be. Come on, make stricter laws. Wake up. And I don't understand it, and I never will. They got to stop these massacres.
Congress was not something I wanted to do with my life.
And I'm going, no one's doing anything about these guns, these assault weapons, the large magazines. I didn't know hunters are only allowed 3 bullets, but they can use 15 bullets to kill a human being. I don't know how you do that. Which, by the way, it's still that way today.
I am trying to stop the criminals from being able to get guns. That's all I'm trying to do.
The yeas are 147, the nays are 280, and the bill is not agreed to.
This should not be a battle. We should not be fighting about very modest ways of trying to reduce gun violence.
We don't need more gun control legislation. I will oppose all attempts to chip away at America's Bill of Rights.
3 guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition.
The horror in Newtown, Connecticut at Sandy Hook Elementary School.
When Newtown happened, I couldn't believe that we couldn't get something done when that happened. I could not believe that the members of Congress or senators could not do something when all these children were killed. I couldn't face the families anymore. I just felt it was time for younger people, younger families, to step in my footsteps and start doing what needs to be done.
It was a tragedy. We tried to fix it through addressing the obvious way we could quick fix it is, let's just take away guns, as if that would make the problem go away, and it hasn't. The mental health issue and the sickness issue in our culture and the treatment issue of people who are alienated or angry or view themselves as victims, we're doing nothing really for. We see every day in New York City random acts of violence, people punching strangers, pushing them in front of subways. People who want to do violence can use almost anything to do violence, including their own physical strength. And I think that's just a sad commentary of where we've gone as a society. 30 years later, we as a culture, we as a country, are in a much worse place than we were. We didn't get here quickly, and we're not going to get out of it quickly.
This is the outcome of a monumental failure on the part of lawmakers and the general public to come together and agree on a way to stop this from happening over and over and over again. It's become such a political football, and meanwhile, people are still dying, people are still being gunned down, and it's only metastasized into something much worse.
I think that we learned absolutely nothing. We in America did absolutely nothing, and mass shootings, which were rare, relatively rare at the time Ferguson did his, you know, now it's just Wednesday in America. Pick a day, another mass shooting.
Nowadays you can't go to a shopping mall or a church or to school. You can't go about the rhythms of your daily life without it somehow being in the back of your head. And it's really horrible that we have to think that way. But that's the reality of life in America now.
When you look back, everyone sees these red flags. The problem is, especially in this country, what do you do with those signs? I don't think we've come far enough in dealing with that.
If you want to take the Ferguson shooting as day one of a national conversation about guns and mental health, what are we, 30 years later? And we're no closer to doing anything about it. We had some 60 people slaughtered in Las Vegas. We had Parkland. We could go on and on and on. You know, the names just all blur together in a repetition of tragedy. And every time, it's time to have a national conversation about guns and mental health. And every time, we talk about that. And every time, we do nothing about it. It's not like, okay, the moral arc of this conversation is bending toward keeping the deadliest weapons out of the hands of the craziest people. It is not.
We're at a worse place with guns. People with mental illness, getting a hold of guns. There's a lot of anger in the United States, and people are taking their frustrations out on innocent people. This is $1 trillion business. It will never be solved, in my opinion, because people are making money. The gun manufacturers are making money, and that's what it's all about. Are they pulling the trigger? No. Are the guns getting in the wrong hands? Yes. It's cancer. And if you don't pay attention of cancer in the early, it's going to spread to every little town in this country, and it will. And here we are today.
Guns are easy to get, whether they're legal or illegal. We're kidding ourselves if we think outlawing some type of gun or magically making all these guns go away is going to solve anything. I think we're much better off looking at why are people doing this and what can we do about it? Why are people wanting to be violent? What is going on in our culture and our value system that people think being violent against others is a good way to resolve whatever is going on in their mind? We don't look at that because it's a much harder problem.
But I hope that somewhere down the road, I will be forgotten. I will do my time on earth and I will go. It is a difficult place, but I will continue.
In my almost 21 years as a judge, I have never presided over a trial with a more selfish and self-centered defendant than you. The vicious acts you committed on December 7th, 1993 were the acts of a coward. You, Colin Ferguson, will never again return to society, but rather will spend the rest of your natural life in prison.
It was devastating to many people, whether they were injured or just witnessed it, people that lost their lives, and that'll be forever. So no, it's not going to be forgotten, and he won't be forgotten.
Our detectives, how about what they go home with at night?
and what they live with inside their heart and in their mind for years afterwards. Think about what those families had to live through and go through. For what? In an innocent ride home from work after putting in your honest day's living, and then your family loses their life. For what?
For a man just to open fire on a train like that, that's one thing that should not be forgotten. You can go off and talk about gun laws and gun rights and all that stuff, but this is what happened. 6 innocent people's lives were taken away, and 19 other people are dealing with the emotions 30 years later.
The biggest pain of my shooting wasn't me, it was for my family. Well, my wife did not know what was going on. And she knew we had a beeper system, because we had no cell phones, so then she'd beep 911. And of course I didn't respond.
This case had a profound influence on me, and I do. I get emotional if I think about what they went through, and I think about how they handled it. And at the impact statements in the court, I cried my eyes out. These are some of the bravest people I've ever seen. The nightmare of this, I don't know how one gets over it. But unfortunately today, a lot of people have to get over these things.
I said that someday we would smile again, someday we would laugh again. Well, if you see Kevin today, he's smiling, he's laughing, and he's going to become a father. So there is hope.
And he did learn how to walk. And he learned how to dance, too. God bless him.
We're up to 19 grandkids expecting our 20th. And after something like that, it was a reinforcement of every day was a gift. And I think it is amazing to come that literally close to death and be able to walk away. And danger surrounds us all every day, not just random gunmen. It's a dangerous world. And I'm grateful for every day I'm still kicking in it.
Hi there. Debbie! How are you? Good, how are you? I'm good. So good to see you. So good to see you. Oh my gosh.
It's a deep bond. It's a deep bond because of what we went through.
We went through a lot together.
Everybody on that train was a hero.
See you, sweetie. Oh, so good to see you.
You look great.
You too. We're all a little older, huh?
Yeah.
And grateful.
You're grateful for living. You're grateful for everything that happens to you. The person in front of me was Richard Nettleton. He was killed. I remember the back of his head. He had long auburn hair. James Garicki was the one sitting beside me. And Kevin and Dennis McCarthy were sitting behind me. I was sitting in the middle of them. I have so much to be grateful for.
We really truly care about each other and are happy that we've all survived it. And I think on the other side, we also think about the people that didn't.
I think the reason why I'm here is to let everybody know who's been in mass shootings that we're here 30 years later. We raised families, we're okay. And if you go back to all the school shootings, they tear me apart because those are your children and the teachers. But go back 5 years later, and you're going to see a lot of suicides. Get the survivors, the victims that are now survivors, get them together in a room so you can put the pieces together, not attack this by yourself.
And the community cradled us. It was financially, it was, they came in, provided support, they gave us the forum to be together, to meet each other's families, and it continued.
We were fortunate to just have each other, supporting one another. If something happens to someone you know, don't hesitate to pick up the phone. Don't hesitate to support them. Don't see what you can do because, I think that's what gets you through.
Write a letter on how worthy and how much they matter to the survivor who was shot. And you know what? They're going to reread it and hang on to it.
I believe someone was looking over you. We are thinking of you, and you are all in our prayers.
Aren't we all?
I'm planning a wedding.
Who's getting married?
My daughter.
Oh, congratulations.
Very
Happy
exciting.
endings.
Yeah.
Happy
It is.
endings.
30 years later, and that's what I'm doing this year, and I couldn't be happier.
I feel so grateful. Thanks, Mom. 30 years later, wedding dress shopping, right? So what could be better? This is really pretty. Yeah, I want to try this on for sure. All laced from head to toe. You want to be on the dance floor all night? I want you to be on the dance floor all night. I'm going to be on the dance floor all night. If you're there, I'll be right next to you. I promise. It's amazing. Who would think? Love you. Thank you. I think about the night that I was on the train, and I thought I would never be a mother. So I've really come a long way to be able to see her in a wedding dress. I can look back and say that I was very fortunate to have these 30 years.
This is how a mass shooting reverberates over time. It really never ends for family members of the victims. It's important to know that these people, these statistics in these body counts were once real human beings who had dreams, who had family, who had loved ones.
My parents came to America from Korea in the 1960s to flee this country that had been torn apart by war and violence. I think that was a terrible irony. We have a war of our own that we're fighting, and we're still fighting here.
Colin Ferguson is serving 315 years in prison. What he did needs to get it right before God calls him home. Because life is full circle. If you don't get it here, you will stand before the Almighty Judge. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes, because 315 years is small to eternity.
Then if I'm to spend 50 years in jail, I wish to spend 50 years in total isolation.